The year is 1815, and on a remote island in what is now Indonesia, a mountain begins to tremble. For centuries, the people living near Mount Tambora had known it as a quiet giant, a looming presence that shaked their horizon but rarely demanded their attention. That would change in April, when the earth cracked open and unleashed one of the most powerful volcanic eruptions in recorded history. What followed was not just a local disaster, but a global chain reaction, one that would reshape climate, devastate harvests, alter economies, and, in a strange twist of human ingenuity, give birth to the earliest form of the bicycle. When Tambora erupted, it did not simply spew lava down its slopes. It blasted vast quantities of ash, sulfur dioxide, and debris high into the stratosphere. The explosion was so immense that it could be heard thousands of kilometers away. Entire villages vanished in an instant. Tens of thousands died directly from the eruption, but the true devastation was only beginning. The particles injected into the atmosphere spread across the globe, forming a veil that blocked sunlight and disrupted weather patterns. Temperatures dropped. Seasons became unpredictable. Crops failed in region after region. And the world entered what would soon be known as the year without a summer. In 1816, just 1 year after the eruption, strange weather gripped much of the northern hemisphere. Snow fell in June in parts of North America and Europe. Frost destroyed crops that farmers had carefully planted in the spring. Rivers froze unexpectedly. Livestock struggled to survive as fodder became scarce. Hunger spread. In some areas, famine followed. Food prices soared beyond what ordinary people could afford. Bread riots erupted in cities. Entire communities faced desperation. Among the many consequences of this global climate disaster was a crisis in transportation. At the time, horses were the backbone of movement. They pulled carriages, carried goods, and served as the primary means of personal travel. But horses required food, vast amounts of it. And in a world where crops were failing, feeding humans took priority over feeding animals. As grain supplies dwindled and hay became scarce, horses began to starve. Many were slaughtered, not just for meat, but because their owners could no longer sustain them. This created an unexpected problem. Without horses, how would people move? How would goods be transported? How would individuals travel even short distances? The crisis forced people to rethink something they had long taken for granted. It was in this context of scarcity and necessity that innovation began to stir. In the German states, a man named Karl Drais observed the unfolding situation with keen interest. He was not a farmer, nor a laborer, struggling to survive the harsh conditions. He was an inventor, someone who looked at problems not as dead ends, but as opportunities for new ideas. As horses disappeared from roads and fields, Drais began to imagine an alternative, a machine that could carry a person without the need for animal power. The idea was radical for its time. Human-powered transportation existed in limited forms, but nothing like what Drais envisioned. He imagined a two-wheeled device, aligned in a straight line, with a frame that a rider could straddle. By pushing off the ground with their feet, the rider could propel the machine forward, gliding along roads without the need for a horse. It would be faster than walking, more efficient over longer distances, and independent of the food shortages crippling traditional transport. In 1817, Drais unveiled his invention, the Laufmaschine, or running machine. It had no pedals, no chain, no gears. Instead, it relied entirely on the rider's ability to push against the ground and maintain balance. Steering was achieved through a movable front wheel connected to handlebars. It was simple, almost primitive by modern standards, but it represented something entirely new, a shift toward personal, mechanical mobility. When Drais first demonstrated his machine, reactions were mixed. Some saw it as a curiosity, a novelty with little practical use. Others recognized its potential immediately. On a test run, Drais reportedly covered a distance much faster than a person walking, proving that his invention could indeed serve as a viable mode of transport. In a world still reeling from the effects of Tambora's eruption, this was more than just an interesting gadget. It was a glimpse of a future where mobility did not depend on fragile ecological systems. The connection between Tambora and the bicycle might seem indirect, but it is deeply rooted in the chain of events set off by the eruption. Without the global cooling and agricultural collapse, there would have been no widespread shortage of horse feed. Without that shortage, there would have been no mass decline in horse populations. And without that decline, the urgency to find alternative forms of transportation might never have reached the level needed to inspire someone like Drais to act. What makes this story so fascinating is how it highlights the interconnectedness of natural events and human innovation. A volcanic eruption on a distant island triggered climate changes that rippled across continents. Those changes disrupted economies and daily life, forcing people to adapt in unexpected ways. And out of that adaptation came an invention that would eventually evolve into one of the most important and widely used forms of transportation in the world. The Laufmaschine itself was only the beginning. It sparked interest among other inventors and tinkerers, who began experimenting with ways to improve the design. Over the following decades, pedals were added, allowing riders to propel the machine without touching the ground. Chains and gears were introduced, increasing efficiency and speed. Frames became lighter and more durable. By the late 19th century, the modern bicycle had taken shape, complete with two equal-sized wheels, a chain drive, and a design that remains largely unchanged to this day. But it is important to remember that this entire evolution traces back to a moment of crisis. The bicycle was not born out of leisure or luxury. It was born out of necessity, shaped by a world struggling to cope with environmental upheaval. In that sense, it stands as a testament to human resilience, the ability to adapt, to innovate, and to find solutions even in the face of overwhelming challenges. The story of Tambora and the bicycle also offers a broader lesson about the role of unexpected consequences in history. Major events rarely have a single isolated impact. Instead, they set off chains of cause and effect that can lead to outcomes no one could have predicted. In 1815, no one witnessing the eruption of Tambora could have imagined that it would eventually contribute to the invention of the bicycle. And yet, that is exactly what happened. As the years passed and the immediate effects of the eruption faded, the memory of the year without a summer lingered. It became a reminder of how vulnerable human societies are to the forces of nature. At the same time, the emergence of the bicycle hinted at a different kind of power, the power of human creativity to respond to those forces. By the mid-19th century, bicycles were becoming more common, particularly in Europe. They were no longer just experimental devices, but practical tools for transportation. People used them to commute, to travel between towns, and even for recreation. The idea that a person could move efficiently without relying on animals or complex machinery was revolutionary. It opened up new possibilities for independence and mobility. In a way, the bicycle also represented a shift in how people thought about energy and movement. Before its invention, transportation was largely dependent on external sources, horses, wind, or steam. The bicycle demonstrated that human power alone could be harnessed effectively, providing a clean, reliable, and accessible form of transport. This idea would later influence other innovations, including the development of motorized vehicles and modern concepts of sustainable transportation. Looking back, it is easy to see the eruption of Tambora as a turning point, not just in environmental history, but in technological history as well. It serves as a powerful example of how crises can drive innovation, pushing societies to rethink existing systems and explore new possibilities. The bicycle, in its earliest form, was a direct response to a world in turmoil, a solution born from necessity, shaped by circumstance, and refined through human ingenuity. And yet, there is something almost poetic about the connection. A violent eruption that darkened skies and brought suffering across the globe ultimately contributed to the creation of a device associated with freedom, movement, and simplicity. The bicycle, with its quiet efficiency and elegant design, stands in stark contrast to the chaos that helped bring it into existence. Today, bicycles are used by millions of people around the world. They are a symbol of sustainability, a tool for exercise, a means of transportation, and even a source of joy. From crowded city streets to rural paths, they continue to play a vital role in daily life. Few who ride them, however, are aware of their origins, of the volcanic eruption, the failed harvests, the starving horses, and the inventive mind that saw an opportunity in crisis. This story reminds us that history is not a series of isolated events, but a web of connections. It shows how something as distant and destructive as a volcanic eruption can influence the course of human development, in subtle and unexpected ways. And it highlights the importance of adaptability, of looking beyond immediate challenges to find creative solutions. As the world continues to face its own environmental and technological challenges, the story of Tambora and the bicycle offers a valuable perspective. It suggests that even in the darkest moments, there is potential for innovation. That necessity, as it has so often been said, truly is the mother of invention. And that sometimes the most enduring advancements arise not from comfort and stability, but from disruption and change. In the end, the invention of the bicycle was not just a response to a temporary crisis. It was the beginning of a new way of thinking about movement, energy, and independence. It was a small but significant step toward a future where humans could rely less on external forces and more on their own ingenuity. And it all began with a mountain erupting on a distant island, sending ripples through the world that would be felt in ways no one could have predicted. The legacy of Tambora lives on, not just in historical records or scientific studies, but in the everyday act of riding a bicycle. Each time someone pedals down a road, they are in a sense part of a story that began over 2 centuries ago. A story of destruction, adaptation, and the remarkable ability of humans to turn even the most unlikely circumstances into opportunities for progress.